Excellent. And now I can just use the clicker? Awesome. That's perfect. Thank you very much. So it's just so I can eventually get to a couple things. So I'll give you kind of the first part, which is the out-of-the-box conversation that I usually kind of give. I'm Shane Reese. I'm the Communications Manager at the Biofuel Center in North Carolina. We're a statewide, private, nonprofit corporation. We're funded through the North Carolina General Assembly in a nonpartisan fashion in order to implement state policy and accomplish a state goal, which is to help build a biofuels industry in North Carolina that replaces 10% of all of our liquid fuel consumption with homegrown and produced biofuels. And we're aiming for the year 2017. Highly ambitious goal. Now, when I talk about 10% of fuel, I'm talking about the fuel you guys used to get up here today. I'm talking about the fuel I'll use to get home today. I'm also talking about the bus running here in Oxford. I'm talking about the F-15 taking off from Seymour Johnson Air Force Base right now. I'm talking about Caterpillar backhoes and bulldozers. We're talking about all the liquid transportation fuel that we use all across the state. Now, the first thing I want to do is answer, what is a biofuel? A biofuel is any liquid transportation fuel derived from biomass, a renewable source for biomass. And what does that mean that's going to be? Well, technically, it's almost anything that's not rock. You could technically make a biofuel out of. But not all biofuels are created equal, and not all feedstocks are created equal. So certain things are really awesome for conversion to biofuels, and certain things don't work as well for conversion to biofuels. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And so we're talking about everything from first-generation biofuels, which we're moving away from here in North Carolina, which is made of corn. And corn to produce ethanol. Go ahead and get that if you need to.
I don't need to.
Okay. I was going to say, so corn is produced so that it can be turned into ethanol, oftentimes in the Midwest, and that's most of the biofuels that we use in this country. But North Carolina, by mandate, is going to build this industry on non-corn crops, non-food competing crops. So now that I've kind of given the general what we're doing profile, why are we doing this? Why would we do this? Why would the state of North Carolina, in a nonpartisan fashion, say it's worth investing in times of economic peril? It's worth investing tax dollars, taxpayer dollars, to support this quasi-government agency to build a biofuels industry in this state. Why would you do that? Why would you even spend that money? 3 major reasons. And so what's interesting about when we talk about biofuels is a lot of the conversation is not even about biofuels. It's all this other stuff. Oh, no problem, no problem. If I need to probably turn mine on vibrate too, just to make sure that, here we go, vibrate, all right.
That's Dad. He's just wanting to know, did you make it?
Yeah.
I'm very bad with directions.
Oh, well, do you want to?
No, I'm okay.
Okay. Well, I don't want him worrying about you.
No, he won't. It's Oxford.
All right.
Can't get too lost.
So the question is, why are we doing this? Why would we go about this? 3 major reasons: job creation, fuel security, and environmental sustainability. So let's break each one of those down. Job creation. We lost 3 major economic pillars in this state at the end of the 20th century: tobacco, textiles, and furniture. All picked up, left our state, went elsewhere, never coming back, never even left a thank you note. You know, so those, I mean, when we talk about pillars, we're talking about basically a pedestal, and we're now sitting on the floor. We were sitting high on the stool, and now we're sitting on the floor. Our rural economies are hungry, willing, talented, able to contribute to the 21st century economy. But there's really not a whole lot to grow right now when we're talking about tobacco. There's really not a whole lot of reason for foresters to be excited when construction markets have tailed off. So now they're looking for new opportunities. Manufacturing is looking, or manufacturing communities, or formerly manufacturing communities, are looking for new opportunities. Biofuels will fit into that in a decentralized fashion. What I mean by that, Daniel, is that as opposed to, for example, biotechnology, kind of clustered in the RTP area. Decentralized, that's a centralized economy. Decentralized means essentially you have to grow so much of this stuff. You're not going to grow it in the big cities.
Right.
You're going to grow it out on farms in rural North Carolina where we need economic development. So that's number one, job creation. And our legislature realized that we were at a disadvantage and that there was an opportunity. Number two, fuel security. We import, or we spend $20 billion every year in North Carolina importing liquid fuel. $20 billion with a B. And that's over, or more than the entire state budget in North Carolina. That's about $16 to $17 billion. So,
Wow.
and then this is different from, Daniel, no offense to you, but I'm going to use my example. It's me hiring Angela, and you did some kind of cool consulting for me. You did some kind of, what do you do?
Well, I used to be in maternity analysis, but
Excellent. So let's say you're in some sort of an analytical consulting of some sort, right? Whatever it is. Is that different, me hiring you for that consulting, is that different from us spending $20 billion on imported fuel? Absolutely it's different. Here's why, Daniel, is because when I hire your mom to do some kind of consulting for me, that's money that leaves my bank account and goes to her. But what happened? It stayed in circulation here in either this region or in North Carolina, or at least in our American economy. I hired her, and now we've created economic development right here. When we spend $20 billion, that gets up and leaves. It leaves our state, most definitely, and it most of the time leaves our country. So when we're talking about utilizing, it's kind of, to be honest with you, my mom right now watches part-time my one-year-old son. And my wife and I are really happy about that because that's an opportunity where I can now, at a subsidized rate, pay my mom for babysitting, but she's not charging me anywhere close to what is charged by a normal daycare.
right.
I'm keeping that money in the family, in circulation, and we'll get to the ice cream bar analogy in a minute that I use, not to insult you, but I use it with my 5th graders. But it applies whether you're 5 or 35 or 55. This applies. So $20 billion we spend, right? We import nationwide or worldwide. We utilize a quarter of the world's oil, but only produce 10% of it. I wasn't a math major, but even I know that doesn't work out, right? If we're using 25%, but we're only producing 10. So, fuel security is one of the major reasons. And when we talk about, for example, the Department of Defense is the #1 customer of oil in the world. #1 consumer of oil is our military. Is that their fault? No, of course not. They have to do what they're charged to do. But they're also beholden to global oil prices. So when your mom, to drive up here, paid, $3.65 a gallon, but then on the way home she sees it's $3.75 a gallon. Okay, so that's a dime difference, and you're probably running a 20-gallon tank, so that's $2. Okay, it costs. So that's a dime difference in a gallon of gasoline. It costs the Department of Defense $500 million. $500 million, $500 million for that one dime increase in a gallon of gas. So that's why when our U.S. Department of Navy and our U.S. Air Force put in place energy mandates, renewable energy mandates for themselves, they're not doing it just to be cool because Apple and Google are going green. They're doing it because there's real sacrifice at the end. Take a guess, Daniel. How much do you think, and I'll hurry, how much do you think 1 gallon of gasoline or 1 gallon of fuel delivered to the battlefield in Afghanistan could cost? One gallon delivered to the battlefield in Afghanistan.
How much is it worth?
How much do you think it costs
To
to ship
deliver
it?
1 gallon?
Yep.
Couple billion?
Well, $400 for that 1 gallon. You pay $400 for 1 gallon of fuel.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So when you have and that's a Department of Defense number, when you have a Humvee or tank on its convoy, or and it's running at 2 miles a gallon,
Wow.
just to get back to base.
That's pretty staggering.
It's pretty staggering.
Yeah.
So once again, when you hear Secretary Ray Mabus talk about how the U.S. Navy and U.S. Air Force each have renewable energy goals, the Navy's is actually to replace 50% of all of their surface, ship, and aircraft fuel use with biofuels by the year 2020. The Air Force is going to replace 50% of all their fuel use with biofuels by the year 2016. Very, very ambitious goals, but they have a real reason to do it. In North Carolina, all this change, why are you talking about all this stuff that's way out here? Well, it's because it comes all the way back to you and me, Daniel. We've got 6 major military installations in North Carolina. So if we've lost jobs and we have an opportunity to grow some new stuff, and then we have a military that has a vested interest in finding new domestically produced fuel that we can control the prices because we're making it here, and North Carolina can contribute, what an awesome synergy that is, dovetail between 2 goals. And then the third one is environmental sustainability. Once again, I'm answering the question, why are we doing this, right? Why should we build this industry in North Carolina? Number 3 is environmental sustainability. Aviation biofuels reduce carbon emissions by up to 80%. Now, what about all of us here on the ground? We have ethanol in our cars. In fact, there's a 95% chance that you have a gasoline car out there?
Yes.
There's a 95% chance that you have biofuel, E10, 10% biofuel, in your car driving up here today and didn't even know it. I have a 95% chance. Because 95% of gasoline in the state has E10. So we're all getting around using a little bit of biofuel and didn't even really know it. So that's one thing, but why I'm bringing that into environmental sustainability is that in the year 2009, American use of ethanol reduced our greenhouse gas emissions. So our footprint on the world, on the environmental footprint, we reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by 59%. That's an American Lung Association number. So this has real impact when it comes to putting people to work, when it comes to stabilizing the price of fuel that gets all of us around, gets our economies going. When you guys go to the grocery store to get some stuff to make for dinner tonight, all of those things got shipped from somewhere. That tomato may have come in from Canada or California, and there you go for yet another piece what are tomatoes running today? $1.30, $1.50 a pound, $2 a pound? I don't
About
even know.
$2 a pound.
Okay, so if it's $2 a
Well,
pound.
depending on the vine ripe ones anyway.
Right. About $1.20, anywhere from $1.20 to $1.40 of that $2 was the cost of transporting it, just getting it there. It wasn't the seed to buy the tomato. It wasn't the fertilizers and the tractors it took and the paying the farmer and the profit and everything. It was the cost of fuel. So these are the things that your generation is going to have to deal with, Daniel, when it comes to creating new efficiencies, being more effective with how we use things and meeting old needs in new ways. So we're going to create jobs, stabilize our fuel independence, and make our environment more environmentally sustainable. I'm going to stop right there for a moment and answer any questions you might have. Just so, like I said, I know it took a long time, but just to answer, we have to answer why are we doing this, and there's a real call to action on why we're here. Yes, sir.
So, it doesn't release any bad chemicals into the air when you're using them?
Great question, Daniel. I can tell you go to early college high school. Yes, it does. It emits carbon. So, and here you go. This is where we don't have anything here to spin or anything to slide by or dance or maneuver or anything. We're here to tell you the facts. In fact, we had an interview yesterday with a reporter, and we simply said, we're making this stuff up as we go along. It's never been done before. It's never been done anywhere in the world, what we're doing here, right? So, we're not afraid to tell you, we know what we're doing. We don't know where this is going, though.
Right.
But it's worth trying, and it's worth finding out where this goes. So you asked a question. Here you go for why I'm not going to spin anything. Biofuels emit carbon when they're used. But, Daniel, what did they do on the front end? And I'll give you a second to think about that, because I'm going to bring it around to the analogy, which would be this stuff right here, fossil fuels, is made out of ancient zooplankton and algae. before the dinosaurs. Way down deep underneath the ground. And we're digging this stuff up. Sorry, those are my two dogs from my fifth graders. But it pollutes our it pollutes our environment, doesn't create jobs, and it's not renewable. That brings back to your question of do biofuels emit things? Yes, they do. So do fossil fuels. They both emit carbon. What's the difference, though? That was down underground hundreds of millions of years, out of our environment, out of our atmosphere, for a significant period of time. Imagine, so let's pretend you're the Earth, and instead of fossil fuels, we're using it like a retainer or something, and you use a retainer when you're 6 years old. And then you try that retainer on again right now. Is it going to fit?
No.
You're a whole different person, right? Our Earth is a whole different Earth from what it was hundreds of millions of years ago. So you've got that stuff contained. Well, now we've ripped it up and emitted it. Here's where biofuels are different. Yes, they emit it when you use them in our cars. What did they do on the front end? When they were crops, what do plants do? They exhale oxygen, and they inhale carbon dioxide. So, biofuels are carbon neutral. And here's why. If I have 6 units of carbon that are absorbed by miscanthus or switchgrass, this right here is switchgrass. It's an energy grass that we're going to grow these biofuels out of, and I'll talk about that in a minute too. This is actually called miscanthus. And if you want, you can shoot your camera at that for a second, just so you've at least got it on tape that you saw and witnessed real biofuels feedstock crops in person. My point is let's say this switchgrass absorbed 6 units of carbon, whatever that is, when it grew, because it's breathing in CO2 and it's exhaling oxygen. And I was horrible at chemistry, but I know that it's keeping the carbon and getting rid of the oxygen. Then it emits 6 units on the other end, because it's not going to gain any more than it absorbed. So 6 minus 6 is 0. Biofuels are different from fossil fuels in a very, very stark manner, and yet they both do the same thing on the other end. So anybody who says biofuels are just as bad, in terms of emitting carbon as fossil fuels, right? But it's not emitting new carbon. It's recycling that same carbon that we often use. And there are actually methods of growing feedstock crops for biofuels that makes biofuels carbon negative. And the way they do that is through 2 things that you could look up later, called I'm not going to get into them right now, called no-till agriculture. And that produces something oftentimes called a carbon sink. And essentially kind of it's an imaginary sink, keeps that carbon in and contains it instead of allowing it to enter into the atmosphere. So great question. Other questions you might have right now when I stop. I haven't even gotten a chance to tell you yet about the crops, and I'll do that as quickly as I can. But I've already kind of given you the big crux of why we're doing this.
So don't restaurants produce this stuff, like when they're cooking?
Good question. So there are different types of fuels, okay, and there are also different types of feedstocks. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to zip ahead to. I told you a bunch of this stuff. We only produce 10% of it. We use 5.6 million gallons, about 17. This is an old slide. I need to update that. That's our goal. I'm going to flip through. This is the building you drove up to. I'm going to flip through these. Sorry if I make you dizzy, because I want to get to something that's... All right. What did we used to make the stuff out of? Corn, soybean, and those went to 2 different types of fuel. So I'm actually going to show you in a minute a chart that will help at least for me, it helped me visualize how this stuff goes. So you have 2 major types of fuel. Biofuel is the overarching term. Biofuel, and then ethanol is a biofuel, and biodiesel is a biofuel. But you can make ethanol out of different stuff, You can make ethanol out of corn. You could also make ethanol out of switchgrass. You can make ethanol out of wood. Now, let's look at biodiesel. I'm getting back to your question on restaurants. Biodiesel. You can make biodiesel out of some of these grasses. You can make it out of soybean. That was the original source for biodiesel. You can also make it out of restaurant grease and used cooking oil and vegetable fats and animal fats and some of these other things you can make. And so there you go, for exactly right. That is a biofuel that's called biodiesel. And it happens to come from when you and I grab some fries at McDonald's and then they take that vat. That has to go somewhere. And they used to pay people to come get it. Now they're actually selling it. Because it's actually turned into a bit of a profit. So you're exactly right. And that's actually part of where the Biofuel Center is. We're the nation's only agency dedicated to all forms of biofuels development.
This is the only one in the country? Wow.
The first
The first in the country.
and only
And only.
statewide comprehensive agency dedicated to all things biofuels. So you're pretty lucky we're all pretty lucky to be living
right here. Yeah.
in North Carolina, and I actually live further away than you do. I live in
really?
Fuquay.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So, but the point is that this is a call to action. I love what I do. This is something that's going to impact my children and his children. Now, that's where we have to, as a biofuel center, we are engaged on so many different levels, whether it be how do we bring a large $170 million ethanol facility to Sampson County. We're also working with small projects. The city of Oxford, the city of Raleigh, the city of Cary, the town of Plymouth. These are opportunities where we have to really think outside the box. And like I told you before, we're meeting old needs in new ways. So we didn't really used to have to worry too much about land and how much land we had, right? Well, now we're getting to a point, probably over the last 50 years, where we've started to realize that land is a precious resource, and that it's not expendable and just replenish itself and everything else like that. That we really have to monitor and utilize it efficiently. Well, that also springs some really creative ideas. If you've got a landfill, Daniel, in Raleigh, and you're essentially getting ready to cap it. Now it just sits there. Well, you can't grow food crops on it to feed you and me because it's a landfill, right? Can't feed livestock. We're not even going to feed our own the animals that we use as food. But what if we fed our gas tanks? So here's a really cool, creative example. What if, like I said, there's a landfill out at Catawba County where they're going to grow sunflowers on a capped landfill. Now, typically, sunflowers fall under this kind of first generation, better off used for food products, more expensive. We need the lower stuff to use for biofuels.
Right.
But why not grow a high-quality oilseed crop on that land that you're not going to be able to use anyway?
Right.
What about the city of Raleigh when you have wastewater irrigation? When the three of us produce wastewater, it has to go somewhere. And so they mitigate the environmental impact of that wastewater by spreading it on fields. Well, now, once again, they go for another opportunity where we can grow crops on that. How about the side of highways? How about airports? How about school footprints, elementary and middle schools that have lots of land?
Haven't I bet you people?
No, we've never been here before.
You haven't?
Angela Davis.
Sam Bright.
She's from Warrenton.
Hey, how you doing?
This is Sam Brake. This is the brains behind the our director of farming.
Watch it, boy. Glad to have you on.
This is the guy who grows stuff like this and is leading the charge when it comes to identifying feedstock crops in North Carolina. Thanks, Sam. So we have to think about all sorts of new ways. So you're right. Restaurants, they fit into it. Municipalities, they fit into it. For example, Gaston County Schools, Lance Crackers down there actually donates their used oils to the school system, and then they actually turn it into biodiesel that now
Wow.
powers the buses.
Wow.
So that's what's really cool is
That
we
is
can,
really cool. I
we
didn't
can,
know that.
right, we can meet, that's what your charge is, Daniel, in this life, is to meet old needs in new ways. Because we're going to have the same kind of stuff. We still need to move. We still need to transport. We still need to travel. We're going to need to do that. We can't do it the old way because we're running out of that
Right.
stuff. So we have to find new ways of doing it. So if we're not going to use corn stuff, here's some of the other stuff we looked at. That's part of what the Biofuel Center is here. I'm actually here to tell you that this is a story that doesn't end happily, but we had to find out. These two crops, really, really promising crops, and yet it just happens to be a little bit of economic modeling that just doesn't work out for it to be profitable. For example, industrial sweet potatoes are really, really, they grow big, ugly, fast, doesn't matter. I mean, they're not like the sweet potatoes we use on our tables. They have to be kind of cosmetically pretty.
Right.
They grow big, fast, whatever. Great source for, because it's a lot of starch, convert it to sugars, utilize it for ethanol, ferment it for ethanol, right? Except for it's hand labor of planting. And they try to find a way of having it mechanized,
Right.
but it just didn't plant the right way. It has to be done by hand.
Oh.
And so there you go. At NC State University, Craig Yensho and Jonathan Schulteis are two researchers who have been working on sweet potatoes for a long time. And it still has an opportunity.
Right.
But that's where the Biofuel Center, it's just as valuable for us to cross something off the list as it is to circle something.
Right.
Because now we know we started out with this big of a scope, and now we're starting to hone. And now we're starting to get into sniper mode, right? So, what will we use? How about energy grasses? Like these things, switchgrass, miscanthus, and even other things that you wouldn't normally think of as grasses, but they are. Grain sorghum, sweet sorghum, biomass forage sorghum. These are actually things that are grown right here on the Biofuels campus. We also grow it across the state. How about a rhododendron? Daniel, you ever been around or heard of woodwind instruments?
Oh, yes.
The oboe, the bassoon, the clarinet.
Yeah.
You know what goes in the mouthpiece? It's called a reed.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually made out of that stuff right there.
Made out of like the stem? Or the
Yeah, made out of. It looks a lot like bamboo, but it grows very, very quickly, and it grows on what's called non-arable or nutrient-deficient land.
Wow.
So this is what's really cool is the crops that we're looking at almost entirely are what we would call low input, high yield crops. I'm not going to insult your intelligence, but just to recap, low input. You don't have to feed it a lot. You don't have to fertilize. You don't have to water it a lot. You don't have to baby it. And
Right.
you know, it's hardy. The stuff is drought resistant. The stuff is flood resistant.
Wow.
Right? Then low input, high yield. We get a lot out. So there aren't very many things in life, Daniel, where you can put a little in and get a lot out. This is one of those opportunities. How about trees? And I'm not talking about chopping down trees off the Blue Ridge Parkway. I'm talking about utilizing trees just like we utilize trees for this paper right here, for the houses we live in, not here, but the chairs we sit in, the paper towels we use in the bathroom. These are all the diapers that my baby boy has on right now. That's a wood product. We don't even really think about how we utilize wood as a resource. Well, we actually have, because of a down economy, we have a 20% surplus of wood in this state. What's that mean? That means you have a market looking for a demand. So you have all these foresters saying, I've got all this wood, somebody buy it, please.
Right.
It's not, as soon as you harvest it, I'm going to grow new.
Right.
I'll grow new trees, but somebody buy it. I've got a product to sell, a product to move, and this is an opportunity for that. There's that dorky guy. So, I'm standing by an eastern cottonwood tree. What's really cool here is these are actually right out here on this back. They're now about 16 feet tall. We started out sticks 14 inches long. Okay? I'm talking, I've sat there and snapped pictures and watched them. They were literally plunking these in the ground. I mean, not like sitting out there putting a flower in a pot, making sure it's all, and just
Right.
90 days later, it's as tall as I
Oh my
am.
God.
90 days, and it's as tall as I am. So, there you go for yet another opportunity, Daniel, where when we talk with foresters and they say, well, listen, I can't plant trees now that my grandson is going to earn the profit on. I need something that I can see in a
Right.
pretty decent economic cycle.
Right.
So now we're talking about fast growth, cloned trees. Things that were essentially like dog or horse breeding. You've gotten the biggest, the fastest. We don't care like the construction people do on nice, pretty, long, straight boards. Once again, just like we were talking about that industrial sweet potato, give me the big ugly.
Yeah.
Grow 'em big, grow 'em fast. And that's what these guys do right here.
So how long's the maturity for that before you can harvest it?
That's it. So, I didn't even get to what my point was, which is typical harvesting cycles are anywhere from 25 to 40 years, depending on the tree.
Right.
We're talking about harvest cycles anywhere from 5 to 8 years.
Wow.
So we've really cut
Shrunk
that
the time.
down so that now you can grow more trees.
Right.
And then, I don't have a slide here, but once again we talked about land efficiency and just getting creative, thinking outside the cliche, but thinking outside the box. Something called intercropping. What if we grew eastern cottonwood trees and we grew a row of them, and then we had a 20-foot gap, and we grew energy grasses in that 20-foot
Oh.
gap. And we grow another line of trees.
And then more grass. Okay.
And more grass. Now you've really got, because you actually have two different cycles
Right.
going,
Right.
right? You got your energy grasses over
Right.
here, you're harvesting every year, and that's what's really
Right.
cool. And over here, you're harvesting every 5 or 7. Miscanthus is really cool. You plant it one time, and you can harvest it for the next 15 to 20 years. So once again, Angela, we have to think about what's it cost the farmer. Because we're not going to get buy-in from the farmers if we haven't thought about, are you going to have to buy new equipment? What kind of fertilizer stuff are you going to have? What kind of preparation? How long will it take to establish all these kind of things? That's where we come in. In the long run, in the future, Daniel, when you're in college, when you're working on your master's and working on your PhD, you'll be driving up to a gas pump and you'll be putting duckweed or algal biomass derived fuel in your gas tank. Now, these are things that are really exciting, but are so far down the road because right now they're really, really attractive ideas. But the best we can get is down to $17 a gallon. I don't know about you, but as much as I want algal biofuel in my car, 17 bucks a gallon is a little bit rich for my wallet, right? So these are the things that, think about it this way though, Daniel. Think about, when this phone came out probably 2 years ago or 3 years ago, it was top of the line. Doesn't take long and boom, they're selling Dells for $2.99, $4.99, whatever.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing with this. So we'll get that $17 a gallon down. Just take us a while. It'll take researchers like you. Then again, you'll be working on something else, not biofuels, right? So, that's the future of biofuels. This is what I was talking about. This helped me understand how we go from different things. And so it's not a misprint. When you see trees, or that's a bad example. When you see algae twice, that's not a misprint. That's not because we've doubled up. That's because you can take the same crop, algae, take it for its key raw material. You're taking two different key raw materials, utilizing different methods, and you can actually spit out algal biodiesel two different ways. So algae, biodiesel. But you did it through transesterification here and through thermochemical there. The general thing that we've talked about today, almost all of those things, the wood and the grasses, fall under that category. We're aiming for that stuff right there that's called lignocellulose. And what we really need is the cellulose. Lignin is kind of the steel beam structure, like the beams in this building that when they built it. It's the structure of the cell. And that is the guard that is the gatekeeper to get to what we really need to get to. So that's where the science comes in, where they can find different ways to break down that lignin in the lignocellulose to get to the cellulose. Those are two main different ways. One is thermochemical. Thermochemical. Thermo means heated up. So you just get it to a really high temperature and you strip off the stuff you need. Or biochemical. You ferment it. Just like you ferment beer or wine or anything else like that. It's the same process. It's a biochemical process. Fermentation, essentially. So, this kind of gave me a really good idea of where we're going. But, remember we were talking earlier about algae and $17 a gallon gas? Here's what's really exciting about that. What's that word right there, Daniel?
Biogasoline?
Biogasoline. Now, we've talked about bioethanol, ethanol, same thing. We're talking about biodiesel. We have something called biogasoline. That's something that actually looks and works like petroleum gasoline, but it's derived from biomass. Ethanol is blended with petroleum. So like I said, E10, you got 10%, 90% petroleum.
Right.
There's a fuel called, E85. You may have seen it before. We actually have 25 stations across the state. E85, 85% ethanol, 15% petroleum. Biogasoline is 100% biofuel that you can put directly into your gasoline engine without any modifications. In fact, it is gasoline, just not made from the same stuff as what we usually make it out of, which is ancient zooplankton and algae. So, Daniel, in the future, when I was telling you about how when you're racing to go turn in your thesis or your dissertation, when you're in master's school or graduate school, that you'll have just filled up on maybe even something that's BG90 E10. BG90, biogasoline 90%, E10, 10% ethanol. So you'd have an all biofuel blend in your car that's doing the exact same thing as your E10 is today, but it's entirely biofuel. Pretty cool. So, I'm going to stop there one more time to answer any questions. These are more, it's called the business of biofuels. It's where we projected at the time 7 different projects across the state. I told you earlier, we're working with the military. And we're also working to convert spray field acreage. It's Hog Lagoon spray fields down in eastern North Carolina into new opportunities. How else can I answer your question so you can feel good about your report moving forward?
What are the... So, basically, it doesn't make more carbon. It uses the carbon already here.
That's exactly right.
You can make it yourself, so it would be cheaper than fossil fuels.
That's right. That's right. But you won't even. You're right. You could make it, and in fact, people do make it. It's called off-road biodiesel. It's oftentimes, because otherwise it needs to be taxed. So, but what's really cool is that when we build this industry, we'll be employing thousands of people, and then what actually helps you is that Daniel isn't going to have to make his own fuel. He'll just pull up to the gas tank or the gas pump, and it will simply be the same price or cheaper.
So, what do you use to fuel the machines that turn it into biodiesel or biogasoline?
That's a great question. So, that's above my pay grade, first off. I don't know. What I can tell you is that there are some closed-loop biofuels facilities. So what I mean by that is, for example, at Catawba County Eco Complex, they utilize heat coming off of another process to fire up their biodiesel process. So there are opportunities, but you're right that there is a ratio that has to break on the positive side. And I have a feeling I know where you're going, which is that for every 1 unit of energy used to produce a gallon of ethanol, you net 1.35 units. So, if you're using electricity or fuel to make fuel, for every 1 unit you use, you're getting back 2.35, netting 1.35. Good question.
So, can some cars just wholly run on just all biodiesel or biogasoline?
And that's something I should have answered earlier. You're exactly. So a gasoline engine can take up to, if it's a car that's 2001 or newer, it can take E15 and lower. So it can take up to 15% ethanol and lower. In the future, like I told you earlier about that, the BG90 E10, that would technically be all biofuel going into your gasoline tank without any modifications. Now, a diesel engine, and there's actually another synonymous thing to biogasoline in diesel, there's actually a difference between biodiesel and what's called renewable diesel. Now, you might say, wait a minute, that's not the same thing. Biodiesel comes from either the cooking oils or the greases or even the grasses or the wood that we use. And it is, you can run up to B100, but you have to have a couple modifications to your fuel line because it's actually you have a fuel line change and a filter. And I think it costs about $200, maybe even less. Maybe it's like $150. And now you're ready to run biodiesel. You can run up to B100. FT diesel or renewable diesel, FT diesel stands for Fischer-Tropsch diesel, is a German process. It's not worth getting too deep into, but essentially what that makes, like ethanol is an additive to be blended with petroleum, but biogasoline is gasoline. Biodiesel is blended with diesel. It can be blended with diesel, but FT diesel, renewable diesel, goes right into the diesel engine with no modifications. So, very good question. And then to produce the fuel for jets, you know, that'll probably be a 50-50 at first, a 50-50 blend of JP8. It's a type of fuel, it's jet fuel, produced from some of this biomass, and then the other 50% will be petroleum. In fact, the Navy will fly again this month, I believe, their Green Hornet, which clearly runs on 50% biofuel.
So how hard is it to convert the things into biofuels?
Very difficult. Very difficult. And then, Daniel, what's even more challenging is building a brand new sector, building a brand new industry. Because let's play investor and farmer. Okay? You're the investor, I'm the farmer. And Angela, your mom, is trying to connect us together. Okay? Now she's going to come to me and she's going to say, Shane, I need you to farm Arundo Donax, or I need you to farm switchgrass. Okay? I'm going to say, Angela, you know, we've been friends for a long time. I trust what you're telling me to do. You know, but who am I going to sell it to? I only have so much land. I got to pay my bills. I got to farm something because that's my form of living, right? That's how I make my money. Just like McDonald's makes a slight profit margin, I have to make a profit margin. If I don't have anybody to sell it to, why am I going to grow, Angela? I'm sorry. Thank you very much, but come back and talk with me when you have somebody to sell it to. She walks away. She walks over to you. She says, Daniel, I know that you're looking for new investment opportunities. We have a great opportunity in North Carolina. Da 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 da. Blah blah blah. Here's an opportunity, and you're going to say, "Mom, I would love to. You're my mom, but why am I going to invest $170 million to build a plant that's going to take me 2 years to build when I don't have anybody farming the stuff for me?" What have we just done? Chicken or the egg? Chicken or the egg? Which came first? So that's where the Biofuel Center comes in. We are the matchmakers. We connect. We iron out those problems. We iron out those deficiencies because we don't have our only vested interest is the biofuels industry taking off. We're not working for a particular agenda. We're not working for a particular company. We're not looking for a particular fuel. Forget biodiesel, we want ethanol. Or forget ethanol, we want biodiesel. Or we want just biogasoline. We're not just working to help, like I said, just working to help a particular company or just to help farmers. We have to connect both of those. So that's where things get really hard, is how to build economic models. So for example, here you go for one of the hurdles that we knew 2 years ago. If I'm growing switchgrass in Warrenton, and then I'm shipping that to Greensboro to get processed, I just lost money driving it. Driving the stuff I'm going to go